Delphine, a big thank you for joining us. So we've had a number of international voices here on SPUCTV recently, so it's great to have one closer to home in you. Now, cancel culture is perhaps one of the most overused, or rather misused, phrases in contemporary discourse. But you were quite literally cancelled fairly recently for your pro-life beliefs. Can you tell us about this chapter in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was back in April 2022. I remember it very well. I was in magazine journalism, a career I'd been in for about 10 years. And it was really such a formative part of my life. It was where I had my social network, my friends, and I was really kind of climbing the career ladder. I wanted to become a magazine editor myself. And I really had no idea that being a women's magazine journalist was completely in conflict with being pro-life. Obviously, like the Bible says, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. I was just innocent. Like I had no idea because I was raised in the diversity, inclusivity, belonging kind of era in my career. So I thought, well, because I'd recently come to Christian faith and I had really understood the theology and the sanctity of life. And it helped me to be like, okay, I can't sit on the fence on this issue anymore. I really do need to speak out. And it was just so fascinating for me because I went to a pro-life launch party and wore a really nice dress. My sister wore a fantastic dress. Took a photo of us two together. There was nothing inflammatory in the photo. It was just me and my sister. And I said, standing up for the biggest form of discrimination, ribbon emoji, like really nice on my Instagram, which at the time was private. It was my personal Instagram, but a lot of magazine editors followed me. A lot of the brands followed me. And after that, it was just like an exodus. I just saw that loads of people unfollowed me. I didn't hear from anyone. And it's sad because I actually consented to my own cancellation because I didn't question it. I just was like, oh. And it went from getting, 18 emails a day from these editors commissioning me for work to nothing, to silence. Like you can look at my inbox and just like from that day to the next, there was just nothing. It was like I didn't exist anymore.
So in a sense then, your cancellation was arguably worse than simply getting the sack in that it was kind of done on the down low in a sneaky way, as in you're essentially ghosted by employers and people in your industry essentially.
Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it. And not only employers, but people I thought were my friends. And, there was actually only one of them who had reached out to me about 6 months later to reveal a little bit why that all happened and to say, sorry, we had to stop working with you. Your values just clearly went against the values of the magazine house. And for me, that probably hurt me the most because I understand to some degree that organizations are their own entities, but it was the individuals that I had called friends, for like 10 years. And I had lost such a big part of that social community and that network. And it was really isolating.
Yes. Well, on the back of that then, do you think that fashion journalism as an industry is redeemable? Or is it simply impossible to work in that world whilst authentically being pro-life?
I think it's getting much more difficult. There's a few examples like Glamour Women of the Year, for example. They helmed trans women in the whole awards, which is just sad because it's an award for women's, and then you're seeing women actually being excluded from it. So you've got this kind of ideologies that are really seeping into women's magazine journalism, which are quite actually at the heart of it anti-women. And then, of course, like the sexual revolution and feminism and all these kinds of ideologies that they really do buy into. And it's almost as if you need to have all of these identity cards to be a magazine journalist these days. I will say that I'm feeling more encouraged because I saw that Teen Vogue shut down. And I remember that Teen Vogue had an article. Teen Vogue, by the way, it's for 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. And they had an article once which was like 10 things to buy your friend who's just had an abortion. And it was like a little gallery. And it was like, buy her some cute underwear, buy her some chocolate, buy her Gilmore Girls. And it was really trivializing something which is so incredibly painful and just such an insidious industry. And just to make light of it, that you can just buy someone pretty underwear and they'll feel okay about it, was just completely inappropriate. And just to And in saying that, you're telling children this, teenagers. So I'm encouraged to see that they have shut down. I'm also encouraged that there are other magazines that are really raising up, that are very pro-family, very pro-woman, like in the actual sense of the word. So magazines like Evie magazine, Verily doesn't Photoshop or anything like that. So I don't think the industry as a whole is completely without hope. I just think that the mainstream has gone completely the wrong direction, and we need to see more magazines that are actually representing women with different viewpoints, and also that really stand up for the family and for the sanctity of life and the dignity of every life.
Yes. So you mentioned that the teens are under threat of propaganda from these fashion magazines. Leads me on nicely to this question then. How do teenagers, students, young pro-lifers protect themselves and their careers against the very real threat of being cancelled?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I said before about being wise as serpents, innocent as doves. So like I had my innocent era where I just had no idea. Like people have said to me, you were so courageous. I genuinely wasn't. I was just ignorant, sadly, that this cancel culture existed. Now is the era to be wise. Like now is the era to be strategic and to understand. So I really see that we live in a legal rights culture, right? Everyone's like, my body, my rights, everything like that. And what we have forgotten is what is actually right. What is the right thing to do? What is morality? What as a society do we need to be doing to lean into being a moral culture that, leads to human flourishing and the good of our communities? So I think in that way, we almost have to fight fire with fire. We're living in this rights era where everyone's obsessed with their rights. So use that. We do, if you are Christian, for example, if your pro-life beliefs are rooted in your faith, you have freedom of religious belief. If you're not Christian, but you're just pro-life from your values, you have the freedom of your philosophical belief. Like these are rights. So we're based in the UK, and these are rights that we have in the Equality Act here. So it's about being smart. Like if the enemy is going to use legalities to try to protect something which really doesn't make sense in the terms of just the natural flourishing of humanity, use legalities to argue against it. So that'd be one thing, is really know your rights. Secondly is be really good at your job. Like be unfireable. Like just smash it, be great. And also let us be in all industries. Don't feel discouraged that, if someone's listening to this and they want to be a magazine journalist, I want to encourage you, be a magazine journalist, because we need people there with these different viewpoints and these different ways of seeing the world. And for me, I completely, as I said, consented to that cancellation. And had I known what I know now, I would have reacted so differently. I would have understood it was clear discrimination. I could have definitely fought back. But I think because I was so young in my journey of faith and in my journey of being like a bit more of an active public pro-life figure, I didn't really know how to react. I was so vulnerable to just being pushed aside. So yeah, just be confident that you actually aren't a minority. Like build this community so that that you can feel confident in that you're protected by the people around you, and be joyful. Change hearts, change minds by just being like a really joyful person that people can't argue with. Because if you're a witness to that, because you're standing up for like the most vulnerable in our society.
Yes, quite literally.
We can do that proudly with our heads held high.
Yeah. And you made a good point earlier, because it can be very tempting. Even I have to resist this temptation. It can be tempting to retreat into oneself, one's own family, one's own community, because the world is getting so crazy. But as you say, we need good, moral, pro-lifers, Christians, whatever it is, in all sectors in society. That's how we'll see pushback, yeah. Now, Delphine, I recently interviewed Sean Corcoran of American pro-life organisation Men for Life. He made the observation, I found it quite an interesting one, that the pro-life movement is led primarily by women, with the distinct lack of men stepping forward. Now, is this an issue that you observe? And if so, how do we address it?
Well, no uterus, no opinion, right? So,
so we've been told.
I have some male friends who have sadly been very hurt by abortion, and they felt they had no control, and they really didn't feel, even though they really wanted the child, that they had a say. And I think that is such a crying shame that society has made men feel powerless when it takes two to be a parent. It takes two to create a child and a new life. So I think I'm really encouraged to hear that more men want to stand up to this. I think from a perspective of like marketing and the kind of visuals, we know that obviously women, it's easier for women to talk about their own bodies, their own rights, their own ability to carry life. So sometimes, it does seem like women are the poster women for the pro-life movement. But I think knowing that men are in it with us, it shows the power of parents as a unit and of men and women as a unit, because we've become so divided as a culture, men versus women. And I think that's really hurt the social fabric of our society today, because we have to live in complementarity. So I really think that it's a good thing, and more men need to empower other men to know that they're not helpless in this. It's not like, oh, my girlfriend wants to have an abortion, and I guess I don't have a say. Like, no, you do, and you need to really also to be able to show that woman that, like, I'm going to step up, I'm going to be a good father, I'm going to be there for you, I'm going to protect and provide for the child. Maybe that's all that woman needs to hear to feel confident to go through with that pregnancy. And obviously, we hear of stories where women are being coerced into having abortions by the the men that they're in relationships with. So in that as well, if you could change the culture with men, if men in general can really see the sanctity of life, you're not going to have that same abuse or coercion happening. So if anything, men stepping up, it protects women, it protects babies even more. Why wouldn't you, and why wouldn't we as women welcome that?
Yes, and that's the point that Sean made. It's such a natural instinct for a man to want to protect his own children. Why should we not extend that to wanting to protect literally the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable in the unborn child?
Exactly.
Now, Delphine, as a Catholic, do you feel personally that there's anything that the church in this country, in the UK, could be doing differently to combat abortion?
100%, so much. I think that the breakdown of family ties, sadly, is really causing a rupture in our social fabric. And I think the church needs to be much more supportive of being pro-family, of showing young people that it's a reality that you can have and you can flourish in, and also not getting influenced by the culture. Like, I know of some Catholic schools that do in their curriculum somehow even talk about abortion in a way that isn't very much like, this is an absolute crying shame. Like, I just feel like abortion is going to be something that one day we're going to look back at and just be absolutely horrified that we ever allowed it into our society and called it healthcare. And I think it's the miseducation of a lot of people, they see it as tolerance and kindness and choice. And we don't really understand what, for me, I really didn't have an opinion on abortion. I'm like ashamed to say, but I'll be honest. Like, so in my early 20s, I just didn't really think about it. It didn't really impact my life. And that was mainly because I actually didn't know what an abortion was. And, my friends who are still pro-choice, I try to say to them, is this a very informed decision, opinion that you have? Like, do you really know what an abortion entails? Do you know what it means? And so I think that actually the church has more need to actually educate people properly and to not be lukewarm on this topic. This is a real horrifying topic that we need to push back against, and we shouldn't be ashamed or scared to say that. And the church as an institution, I think, needs to be exactly much more pro-family, much more supportive to the family, to the community, to building up that community and those community ties, and also to speaking the truth, the biological truth of what abortion means and what it entails.
Yes, and from my perspective, the church could also do with not shying away from the basic sanctity of life argument. So it can be tempting to resort to what the culture is saying about abortion, to argue on their terms and along their lines. Whereas sometimes you just need a reminder that all human life is inherently sacred. And whilst others don't necessarily acknowledge the sanctity of all human life, that message needs to get out there, whether they will or not. Now, finally, Delphine, what's the one thing that you personally wish that advocates of abortion knew about pro-lifers? Perhaps you in particular. What do you think? What do you wish they knew about you?
I think that I really love women. Like, the reason I went into women's magazine journalism is because I wanted to tell stories and I wanted to show womanhood in all of its shapes and sizes and all of its different guises. And I think, you get called so many things when you're publicly pro-life. You get called anti-woman, dangerous, evil, and I think it's just, I wish people would really understand that. Do they think we want to be persecuted? Like, do they think that we want to put ourselves out there where we're being literally sent rape threats, death threats, because of something we believe in so inherently? And do they not question why we're doing this? Because no one would choose to put themselves in that position for fun. It's because exactly what you're saying, the sanctity of life. And I don't think anyone would really argue with that every single life, is inherently sacred and has dignity, no matter, if they're a man or a woman, if they're disabled or able-bodied, any of these things, like, they are absolutely an incredible, unrepeatable creation. And that's amazing.
That's the most inclusive message one can think of. That's true inclusivity and equality.
1000%. And that's the thing. I just wish people would think more critically and ask questions and really understand that, you have to look deeper. And actually, the foundational argument, as you say, is so simple.
So the fact that the mainstream media does its best to avoid all discussion of abortion, is that essentially them failing us?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, the whole thing about media and journalism is it's meant to be about democracy and it's meant to be representative. And the fact that pro-lifers believe that they're this tiny minority is completely because they're being incorrectly represented in the media. We don't have TV shows on Netflix where someone's battling the fact that they're pro-life and they're having a problem at work because of their convictions or something. We don't see that in the mainstream. And it's a crying shame because we're not seeing the fact that we actually have diversity of viewpoints. Everyone talks about diversity, but we don't talk about the fact that, well, there are different worldviews. And, the philosophy of being pro-life, for example, is just not out there because everyone feels too scared to talk about it. And, there's this concept of the Overton window, which is like this window that allows, just things to be spoken about normally in public society, in the court of public opinion. And we constantly close that window by being too scared to talk about things that are uncomfortable or that we have to wrestle with or that don't, really sign into this culture of virtue signaling and tolerance and fake kindness. I mean, it truly is false. It's a house of cards. So I think it's really sad. And to be honest, that's why I really stopped believing in journalism, because I was like, well, it's not true. It's just all like a script that they just want to push through and everyone's just in an echo chamber or algorithm. And that's not how we're meant to be living. We're meant to be living in reality, grounded in reality. And we exist.
Yes, you mentioned the Overton window. I think we should take some courage in the fact that we are seeing the Overton window shift on the issue of gender ideology. That we're reaching a tipping point there. So we should have hope as pro-lifers that it will shift further.
And I think on that point, it's really interesting because that shifted because you suddenly started having, women who really identified as feminists being like, actually, this isn't correct. And it was interesting because you saw some of these in arguments of different groups and people with different identity politics. And again, it's all these people have gone into tribes and become very divisive. And they're forgetting that we are all humans of the world and we all want, hopefully, the flourishing of society and the flourishing of families and children to grow up feeling loved and cared for. And when you just go back to these very basic principles, and it's good, I do feel that this is shifting. More and more people are like, actually, that makes sense. That's common sense.
Yes. Well, Delphine, thank you. Thank you for you are quite literally a living example that there is life after being a pro-life professional who was cancelled. There is very much life and a career after that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, William.
Thanks very much.